My name is Kai, and I'm on my way to the Centre for Mental Health in London to interview its Chief Executive, Sarah Hughes. Sarah has more than 25 years of experience working in mental health and criminal justice. She first trained as a social worker, and she has managed a range of different community and secure services. Sarah has shown incredible leadership in changing attitudes towards mental health and reducing stigma with her work in mental health services. I'm an artist, and I look at the body and mind in motion and commotion in a world in motion and commotion. So basically, I use things like running, walking, swimming to see how you can create change in the world around you and also in yourself. 2 years ago, I was told that I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It's so hard to say, ADHD. And that caught me by surprise, because here I am, a fully formed person, and as an artist, as a researcher, as a woman, so I had a lot of questions. There's a very limited idea of what ADHD is out there. For example, its association with crime, its association with males. But that is not the full picture, obviously. And the way I want to learn more about it is to use art as a process of inquiry. I'm really excited to meet Sarah today because of her work in mental health, and also because she's a woman like myself. Today I'm hoping that she's able to kind of unpack some of those ideas for us so that we can understand her own perspective and also her own experience of mental health. Hi Sarah, it's so nice to meet you finally, and thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm really curious to learn more about you as a person and also a lot more about your work.
Okay.
Tell me about the work of Centre for Mental Health. What is it trying to achieve?
Okay. Well, you know, the Centre for Mental Health is a really well-known policy research organisation across the UK, and we're best known for translating academic research in terms of making a difference and impact on policy and practice. I think the issues that we are interested in are really the things that are the least attractive to the kind of the general kind of population or the general kind of world of mental health, and that's partly because we want to bring to the fore the issues that aren't getting or receiving traction but have the biggest impact on people's lives. So for instance, we talk about immigration removal centres. That's not popular, certainly not popular right now. But it's really important. The people who are in immigration removal centres are not having a great experience, and their mental health is certainly at greater risk because of that experience. We're particularly interested in race equality. We're really interested in the experiences of people who are living in poverty. And until we kind of really make a deep impact on those issues, we're not going to see significant improvement in people's mental health or deterioration into mental illness. You know, we just have to face the facts that these other issues are very important.
There's something I read about which I found really interesting. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about, which is your first night in custody project at the Holloway prison. I wonder if you could tell us about that, what you were trying to achieve.
The first night in custody project at Holloway prison was groundbreaking at the time. You know, at that time, certainly in 2002-03, and still sadly today, I'm sure, that women could be sent to prison for non-payment of council tax. They would take their children to school, they would go to court, they would get sent to prison. There would be no one there to pick their children up from school, their families wouldn't know, so we would provide practical help to kind of sort that situation out. We were looking for suicide risk, the risk of self-harm, trying to make sure that we were the honest brokers between the individual and the rest of the prison. The reality of some of the women's lives who were coming into prison were beyond my comprehension. But first night in custody was a really good start in trying to kind of understand their needs in a broader way. We were very fortunate. We had really good partners at the time, which meant that first night in custody was rolled out across the prison estate, both for women and men. So we really directly affected policy at that point, and first night in custody still exists today.
So what do you think is the most important advancement in the area of mental health in the last 20 years, Sarah?
Oh my goodness, that is a really difficult question. I suppose I would say that there hasn't been any kind of mind-alteringly amazing interventions that have been developed that are, literally having the kind of direct, rapid impact that we want. Of course, what we've seen in physical health is massive advancement. So, if we think about artificial limbs, the extraordinary progress that we've made. We also need to have that level of investment in terms of mental health research and looking at interventions and best practice. So what day-to-day interventions make a difference? So there's no doubt the Improving Access to Psychological Therapies programme has massively changed the day-to-day experience of people who've got mild to moderate conditions. You can access psychological therapy pretty much anywhere in the country within a reasonable waiting time. And I think that is quite extraordinary. We have the biggest psychological talking therapies programme in Europe. Amazing. However, for people who have perhaps more complicated experiences, we're not at the place or at the point where we're able to kind of turn things around quickly enough. We have got early intervention in psychosis, and that is making a difference. I think I would like to see more work on looking at comorbidities. So for me, there are kind of huge strides we need to make. So I think I'm not answering your question. I feel like I'm still creating more questions, I guess. But we're moving in the right direction. But we need more research funds. We need more of that. We need more of the thinking around, looking in different places. Technology. What is technology going to offer us in terms of people's mental health recovery or recovery from mental illness?
What's the biggest challenge for widening the interface between research and the community sector?
Again, a really pertinent question right now. I think the issue is that we've had, certainly in mental health, and I'm sure in other parts of the system, that there is a really big gap between research, what happens in services, and the pace of change in policy. And often that's because research is done in a very kind of academic, pure way. And so how do we move what we know and what we're learning through research into service delivery and policy change? What is it going to do for Joe Bloggs, who is living in a council flat, who is experiencing psychosis and perhaps has a drug and alcohol problem? So we work with a lot of academic partners, quite a large number around the country, and they draw us in so that we can say to them, that's very helpful and really great, but we don't know how we're going to make sense of it. And it's that kind of relational stuff between academics and other partners, perhaps people who are delivering services, people with lived experience, of course. So I think that we've been successful in closing the gap in certain areas, but not widely enough.
What have you learned over the years? Is there any particular thing, incident, or people you've met that have stopped you on your tracks?
One that does come to mind is very early on in my career, I worked in housing support. That's the job I had in the early days, and I remember once walking into one of the houses that I was kind of visiting one day, and one of the guys who had lived there for a few years walked towards me, and he was clearly distressed, and he was holding a knife, and he said, "Oh, it's not for you, it's not for you," and kind of retreated. And I sort of walked towards him a bit more and was saying, "Are you okay?" And he slit his throat. And before I go any further, he did survive. So he survived the incident. But I remember, holding him together, and anyway, the ambulance got there and everything was fine. But I remember the overriding feeling and learning that I had that day was the depth of emotional pain, and the lengths people would go to try and take away that emotional pain. And I guess it taught me something about compassion and never losing sight of the reality of some people's experiences and holding that quite close always. For some people, taking your life or self-harm is the better option, and that's a hard place to be.
And how precarious the whole situation is. So we're coming to the final question, and let us end on a high note. Let's end on a positive note. So I wonder what your greatest hope is in terms of mental health for the next 20 years.
Gosh, we could be here all day, but I'll try and be brief. But I guess the first thing I would say is that we really do need to tackle inequalities. When a Prime Minister stands up and says, I want to deal with the burning inequalities that rest in this country, then someone like me is going to hold her at her word. So for me, that's number one. I think I would like to see a bigger, and I hope you probably agree, a bigger investment into research. I think we cannot continue with the kind of sweepings off the table for research into psychiatry, mental health, mental illness. I would like to see it to be less medicalised. I would like us to stop focusing on what psychiatrists need to know, but also what everybody else needs to know. I think parity of esteem is a really also another one that's really important. Now, what I mean by parity of esteem is not that everybody just gets the same thing. It's just that we're literally understood with kind of equal respect. And it's like that same question when you ask somebody in an interview, what do you understand by equal opportunities? The answer is never that everybody is considered the same. The answer is that you give everybody the same opportunity in being understood as unique individuals. We can't treat somebody who's having a psychotic episode in A&E in the same way as somebody who's broken a leg. But what we do need to be able to do is respond to that person who is in the midst of a psychotic episode at the same pace and with the same respect as we would to that person who has fallen down and had a heart attack. That's what I'm talking about in terms of parity of esteem. I'm hoping that's not going to take 20 years. I mean, maybe that will take me to the end of my career and I can retire to Goa, which is what I want to do. But I hope that we'll make some of those strides in the next kind of 5 years, really.